Well, welcome everyone to this jail forum tonight. My name is Seth Gregg, and I've been asked to moderate the discussion. I am the Executive Director of the Idaho Association of Counties. We provide support, technical assistance, and training for county elected officials around the state. And as a side, I'm actually a Payette County native, so I grew up here in Payette. And so I have a background experience here. My parents still live here in Payette, actually, and so familiar with the area and some of the issues here. Just a few housekeeping measures before we get started. We do have an hour for the panel discussion. In order to kind of expedite the discussion and make sure that we're getting through things as efficiently as possible, we do ask that if you have a question, you submit it via the cards. Adam, the gentleman in the back in the green shirt, has pens and note cards. And so feel free at any time to do that. Get your note card back to Adam and he can get those to me. What we find sometimes when we have conversations like this is sometimes there might be duplicate questions, and this helps us to get right to those points. And then afterward also, it's my understanding that there will be a tour of the jail for those who signed up for that. So there will be that opportunity for those that signed up in advance to do that. Before we get started, I would like our panelists to introduce themselves. And I guess we'll start over here on the far side with Commissioner Bishop. And if you want to come this way and just let us know who you are and why we have you on the panel today.
I'm Ken Bishop. I'm County Commissioner for District 3, which is basically Fruitland South. I've been on the commission a couple of years now. Been involved in Fruitland community government for a while there too, so I'm pretty familiar. Grew up in Fruitland, so familiar with the area.
I'm going to stand up because I'm short and nobody can see me. I'm Anne Marie Kelso. I'm a county commissioner from District 1, which is Payette. I actually grew up in Fruitland, but now I live in Payette. I've been on the commission for a few years, and then I was a former prosecutor, so I know my way around the criminal justice system a little bit too.
I'll just sit here. My name is Jennifer Reeve. I'm the County Commissioner in District 2, which covers all the way from the south end of the county in Sand Hollow all the way up through New Plymouth, parts of Fruitland, and it's a very large area. I do live in Sand Hollow, so I'm on the south end of the county. I've been a commissioner for 3.5 years.
I'm Andy Creech. I'm the sheriff. I am on my second term as sheriff here.
I'm Adam Ryderson. I'm a regular citizen, just like all of you, except I'm sitting behind the desk over here. I was asked to serve on this committee just to give input from a regular citizen, ask questions as if I was you. My experience here in Payette County, I served 9 years on the school board, and I do have some experience with work in facilities management.
I'm Lindsay Bratcher. I am your clerk, and I've been the clerk since 2020 and lived in Payette County my entire life.
My name is Annie Knudsen. I was part of the Citizens Committee, which is why I'm also behind the desk. I'm a Payette County resident. I own and operate a business in Fruitland, and my other community ties include the Fruitland Chamber of Commerce. I serve on their board, and I'm also a board trustee for the Fruitland School District.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, and thank you all for being here with us this evening. Jails are, well, I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit about counties. Counties are in really a unique position in the state. We're essentially the political arm of the state, and much of what counties do are directed by the state government. One of the functions that has been delegated to counties is the operation of county jails. Each county is either required to operate a jail, and there are certain standards that have to be adhered to in doing that, or you're responsible for finding housing with neighboring counties and others to house your inmates. Most of our counties around the state do have a county jail that they operate. We do have a handful of very small counties who have determined it's just not feasible for them to do, and they'll contract with other counties for the housing of their inmates. County jails are unfortunately an expensive proposition, and they also have a lot of liability that the counties have to deal with. And so it's one of those, again, those challenges the counties have to navigate and operate with. I do notice, based off of some of the questions we've already received and one that was submitted online, that location is I know one of the primary issues of concern and why some of you may be here this evening. So I think that's probably a good place to start. And so just to summarize some of these, some of the questions related to the location of the jail. I know that the county owns some existing land out by the landfill, and I believe that there are many that think that that's likely the location of the jail. Can you talk a little bit about where the location will be, you know, the pros and cons of that site versus other sites that might be under consideration? And let's just get that one out at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah, so that's a concern that we've heard as I've been out talking with people over the last several months, is this location. And the reality is that the location hasn't been decided upon. And so in January of 24, we started working on planning for our facilities. And we spent all of 2024 working on that. And that's really the time that we used the Citizens Committee in helping review and look at a lot of different things and ask a lot of questions. And in that process, they looked at several different locations where the jail could be built at. Whether that was on this block where we're at today, and or if that was moving somewhere else. And ultimately, the recommendation from the Citizens Committee was to use property that we already owned, because this block wouldn't be large enough to house the size of jail that we need to plan for. And if we leveled everything and built it here, there'd be no room to expand it in the future. So we'd have to start again at the ground level and build again. And so their suggestion was use property we already own. And I know that behind that suggestion was keeping the cost of the project as low as it could be. And so in mind of, you already own the property, use property you already own. But I'll say that in addition to that, the county's been working on a new facility for the paramedics, using a different funding source to pay for that. But when they have been planning for their water and sewer to be extended from the city of Fruitland to the piece of property that we have for them to build on, that cost is like a third of the entire cost of that project. And so when you take that cost that they're anticipating down to like a per foot cost, and and then for using the property we already own, we will have to extend city services about a mile to get them there. And so when you take like the cost that we're looking at this other project, and you start to compare that to using the property we already own, I think it's likely that as we get into getting the engineering studies done and we start looking at feasibility, that we're gonna find that it's gonna be too expensive to use property we already own. And so really we haven't made a decision on where the facility's gonna end up at. The suggestion was to use property we already own rather than making the cost of the project higher. But there's a chance that using that project is gonna actually make the cost higher than it would be just to buy property that's already near or adjacent to city services. And so that decision has been made. If the bond was to be passed, then the next stages will be those studies that will help us with deciding where the most cost-effective place to build it at will be at. And in that process, I know the commissioners have already said, and I'm open to engaging with the public as we decide and kind of identify where it's going to be at.
So a follow-up question that is associated with this, it's about that site selection. Why go for the bond first as opposed to, and then wait to determine where the site is? Why not take a look and find the location first and then go to the voters for the bond?
Yeah, sure, and that's a really good question. It really comes down to money and finances. And so as you start paying for engineering studies and feasibility studies to be done, that all costs money. And the county doesn't have a large amount of money that we're just sitting on, that we have available to pay for these studies. And so you know, the hard part is that we don't have this money to put out up front to do all these studies on different pieces of property to figure out where we should build it. The money from the bond will be what helps pay for that and help that to happen. And so it's really just a matter of finances, of cost, and being able to pay for that out of what's available to the county now.
Commissioners, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I think Andy said it.
Okay. So I do have another question that came in related to funding that might be best addressed, Lindsay, by you. It's related to the Justice Fund. And in Idaho code, there is a provision that allows you to accumulate funds from year to year. Could that be used as a funding source for a new jail? Yes, no, and what are some of the challenges, or why couldn't it be used?
It would never accumulate enough to fund a jail. So currently, our justice fund is, didn't bring our LT with us, but I think our justice fund budget is $8 million. And that also does cover our prosecutor's budget as well. And our unencumbered funds that we have are close to $5 million. So we keep at least 6 to 9 months worth of the budget in unencumbered to cover us should we have any shortfalls. So we don't have, it would take way more than 30 years to save enough in the justice fund to fund the jail. We can't increase the fund larger than there's budgetary caps. Each year we can only increase so much, and that doesn't just stick with just one fund, that's countywide, so all of the departments can only increase cumulatively by a certain percentage. Do you think yes, 3%, but do you think I'm answering that question?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess maybe I'd ask a clarifying question on that. So of the funds that are budgeted annually for sheriff's operations, and I'm asking this on the fly, I don't think there's been any prep work on this, how are those funds allocated with your office? Because it's not just the jail that's funded through that budget.
Yeah, so I manage several budgets, actually. I manage about 5 budgets, and the largest of those budgets are the sheriff's budget and the jail budget. And then I also have the dispatch budget, the boat budget, emergency management budget. Dispatch and the boat budget come from other sources, not tax revenue. But the sheriff's office and jail budgets come from that. And really, when you look at those budgets, anybody that's ran a business knows that one of the highest costs is your own staff and employees. So when you look at their wages and benefits, that's the largest piece. But when you look at the jail facility itself, not only is the wages to run the facility one of the largest pieces, but also the cost to provide any of the food for them, and then medical services. And really, when you look at that budget, those are the 3 largest items in the entire budget.
Okay. Another related question, this is more budget related. In the event that that the jail is funded and built, that the dollars accruing through the bond will be used to pay down the debt on the jail facility, not for the operation of the jail. And so do you have an idea of the additional staffing that might be required and what the ongoing costs of operating that new jail would be?
Yes, when you look at the jail facility that we have today, it's built in a very inefficient design. And it takes a lot of staff in order to keep up with the number of rounds, and so every so many minutes our deputies have to go to every cell and check on every inmate to make sure they're okay. And with the way it's designed, it takes quite a bit of time for them to make it all the way through the jail facility and check on every inmate that's in there. In a new jail facility, they're built more efficiently, so they take less staff. And so, you know, when we were in the master facilities plan a year ago working on this, we engaged with an architect to help with some estimates, cost estimates. And the cost estimate that they gave us for building a new facility was extremely high. And for me, as I looked at as a taxpayer here too, I said, this is too much money. And so I started looking at other facilities. And really the facility that I've seen and I went and toured and that I liked is in Indiana. And in that facility, they're running a 220 bed facility with only 5 more staff members than I'm running for my 69 bed facility. And so it's likely with a building that's built more efficient, that's easier to operate and run, that we wouldn't have to add that many more staff members to what we already currently have in order to make it run.
Thank you. So here's another question that came in. This probably is best directed towards you, Sheriff Creech. What outside professionals have been utilized to recommend specific security coverage, ensure the safety of inmates, staff, and the community?
So in the next phases of this, as we engage with architects and project managers, those things will really come down to where we'll really plan for those things out and make sure that it's built safely. I can tell you that when you look at our jail facility here today, the last escape that we had out of our facility was 11 years ago, and it's pretty memorable. The guy climbed over our concertina wire out in the rec yard, and he ended up in Cancun. I'm sure anybody who is here remembers it. I mean, I do. And really, when you look at the vulnerabilities of our facility, that rec yard is one of them. And another one is when we bring them through the unsecured hallways into the courtrooms here. And that's really the 2 places where when we have inmates escape from the jail, that's the 2 most likely places where it's gonna happen. In a new facility, we don't have to allow the inmates to go outside. And in a new facility, my intention is that they won't. What the standards require is that they have to have access to daylight, which can be done through skylights, and they have to have access to fresh air, which can be done through a screened off window that can be rolled up to allow fresh air in. They don't actually have to go outside. And so I think there's ways that we could build the jail more secure while still meeting the standards that will help prevent the opportunity for not only them to escape, but for contraband to come into the jail facility. And overall, I think that a new facility is gonna be more secure than the one today, and it's gonna be easier to maintain.
So I'm gonna shift and give Andy a little bit of a break and ask our Citizens Committee members a few questions. When the committee reviewed the various options and looking at the potential of a new jail, when you looked at the condition of the jail and some of the needs, what were the most pressing issues that you saw in recommending a new facility? I guess we'll start with Annie.
So when we started this venture, we were given a tour and we were given a survey. The community was given a survey and staff was given a survey, and through that process, I would say space would be one of the biggest concerns. I would say probably safety in that space would be another concern, and then maintenance would be big concerns that we had.
Adam, any thoughts?
Yeah, for me it was space. Maintenance was a secondary, but space was probably the biggest concern I had. A county our size, I think, needs a larger facility. We've got a lot of people that are out that should probably be in jail, but we don't have a room for them.
Yeah, I want to put a pin in that because I'll ask the question to Andy about that here in a moment. But before we get to that, when you were looking at options, I know that you guys considered a potential expansion of the existing jail, remodel here versus building a new jail. What did you guys look at and consider when you were considering whether to remodel or build a new facility? And why did you ultimately decide as a committee to recommend a new facility? This time, we'll start with Adam.
Well, we looked really closely about this, with keeping on this site right here, a couple of different configurations. In the end, we just determined that we're just landlocked here. This site, we kicked the can down a dead end road, I think, long enough. We put a Band-Aid on it 20 or 25 years ago. it's time that we plan ahead now for the next 50 years or beyond. I don't know, I mean, those of you who've been in Payette County a long time, you know the growth that we're experiencing. I don't expect it to stop. Our small towns are growing tremendously. We need to create a facility that can handle that expansion. We just need to plan for the future. Anyway, and so we determined that an off this site was the best recommendation.
So Andy, Adam mentioned there are people that should be in jail that you're not able to keep in jail while they're awaiting trial for other reasons. Do you have an idea as to any given moment how many people are out on pretrial release awaiting adjudication versus awaiting trial here in jail?
Yeah, so I think it was back in about 2019 that we started pretrial release. And really, we were just working with the judges and the court system to try to find ways to help manage our population. Because we already had been seeing overcrowding as it was. And that has grown to where we're running over 300 people out on pretrial release. About 80% of those people are charged with a felony that we're releasing out. And a lot of these people are people that we used to hold in jail on bond through their court process. And so, you know, as a mechanism to try to really control the number of inmates that we have in our facility and how overpopulated we are, us and the courts are using that to really try to leverage that to help us maintain that our population. But as we do that, I mean, one of the main concerns that I know that our courts use is the safety to the public. But these are people with felonies that we're putting out there. And there's always a concern that these are people that will reoffend and that they will, and that we'll see them back in jail again. And the problem with them reoffending is that it might be a crime that victimizes one of our citizens.
I'm going to go to the county commissioners next. So I've got quite a few questions here related to the financing mechanism that's been decided. And so I'm going to try to combine these into a question and let you address the various elements of it. So one, why did the board decide to move forward with a general obligation bond request, go to the voters for that? In this process, have you guys explored grants, other potential revenue sources that could help offset the cost of a jail? And another question along these lines is related to the interest that the county will pay. In this particular question, the concern isn't so much with the cost to build a jail, but the interest that the county will be paying to pay down this debt over the next 30 years. So can you talk a little bit about the decision to, again, bond versus try to get grants, pay as you go, and then, you know, the interest considerations as well? What's the county doing to mitigate some of that?
It's a lot in there, so let me start. So the reason we're bonding is because simply we'd never have enough money to pay for a jail. You can save for 10 or 15 years and then you think, oh, I have enough money, but in 10 or 15 years, you know, what happens? Everything is higher price. So you can never save for the amount that it costs to build a jail. What was the second question?
So grants, have you guys considered grants? What options have you explored?
We have looked into some grants, and you know, for whatever reason, jails just aren't a very big area for grants. There's not a lot of money going to jails. There's money for things in jail, treatment programs and things like that we could get grants for, but for capital construction for jails, there's just not a lot out there. Yeah. And as far as the interest goes, yes, we understand. I believe it's calculated right now 3.9%, is that correct?
3.7.
3.7, so, you know, not the worst interest rate, and we know that that's money that just goes to a bank, but it's really the only option at this point. And so we felt it was in the best interest of the county to go ahead and move forward with the general obligation bond. And the reason I think one of your questions was why are we, you know, another reason for bonding, we can only bond for we can bond for capital construction. It's one of the few things we can bond for. So it was an avenue that we had, and it was a reasonable avenue that gave us a jail in a reasonable amount of time.
Other commissioners, any comments on that?
No, I would second that. It's not something that we can build incrementally and keep adding on to. For a project this big, we need a large amount of money to build it in one piece, which for a county of our size, a bond is really the only way to come up with that large chunk of money and pay for it over time, so.
A few other questions, and I guess this one, I'm gonna pose to Sheriff Creech. Will the municipalities in Payette County, will they contribute in any way to the overall cost of paying the jail or the operations?
Well, for paying for the operations, the county is the one with the obligation. The sheriff is the one that's designated as the duty to provide the jail facility. And so the cities don't contribute to that. The only way that the cities could in different areas of the state is if the jail's housing inmates that are charged on only their ordinances and not state laws. But generally speaking, they won't be making payments to help run that jail facility. It's a county function that's required by state law for the county to offer.
Another question related to, I guess this is more the siting, the location. So I think everybody understands that the voters will have an opportunity to vote up or down on whether the county incurs debt to pay for a jail. Will voters have an opportunity also to vote on the location of the jail?
There won't be a ballot vote on that, but we've over the last year and a half been working with and trying to engage the public. The surveys that we've put out, we're still getting responses on them, and we're still considering and looking at them. We're still, like, those responses are really helpful to the county as we move through this process. And on our website, there's a place where you can put in questions, and those questions are also helpful to us. And so what I will commit is that if the bond was to be passed, that there's gonna be a process that we're moving through. It's gonna be involved in public meetings, and we'll engage with citizens, and there'll be opportunities for citizens to engage with us to help us as we're determining that. The reality is that I believe that we need the facility, and the location needs to be a place where the citizens would support it being at.
I'd like to add to that. Just to expand on a little bit of what Andy said, whatever site is selected is gonna go through the same planning and zoning process that any other development will. So if it's in one of our cities or in the county, it'll go through the planning and zoning process. And if it needs a rezone for that to happen, then there'll be public hearings and opportunities for citizen input through that same kind of development process. So it would be like any other development with that kind of opportunity to comment and be involved in it.
So here's another question that I'd like to pose, and I guess we'll start with, this really can be answered by a number of you. Can the old building be used in some way to generate revenue to offset the cost of the new jail? So what are the options that are being considered with the old jail, and is there an opportunity for the county to raise revenues from that would help to offset the costs of the new jail? Look at you, Sheriff.
Honestly, we haven't contemplated exactly that kind of scenario for it. Some of the space will still be utilized. The sheriff is gonna be using some of that space still for some of his functions. We'll still have to have space to house, to bring an inmate here prior to, their trial or what happens that day. There'll still be some of that kind of facility going on. Beyond that, we hadn't thought about any kind of revenue generating scenario at this point. You wanna add anything?
Yeah, just that when you look around the courthouse, we've used all of the available space here, and when I say that, I truly mean it. Like, we have put employees working in our vaults because there's not room in the office spaces for them. We took across the hall over here was our janitor's closet. We turned that into a lobby for our attorneys, public defender attorneys, and so we've just ran out of room here. And when you look at storage, we ran out of room for storage as well. And so So part of that jail facility, if we were to move out of that into a new facility, will likely be used in storage and stuff like that until we get to the phase 2 of that master facilities plan that deals more with the courthouse directly. And so, using it to bring in revenue is not something that's been discussed, but I don't know that's something that couldn't be discussed.
Add to that, Andy. So, it's not only, I mean, I think the idea of revenue is actually smart, you know, someone's thinking, oh, well, try and make some money. Here's one of the big problems with the old jail though, it's run down. I mean, we would have to do some serious renovations in it just to make it where people would even want to rent it out. I mean, there's a kitchen, so I suppose there might be some use, but the plumbing is a mess. I mean, we're constantly doing maintenance on that, expensive maintenance, cause everything's old. So, while I think that's a great idea, I also, you know, say this condition of this building's not good.
Whoever asked that question, you're my kind of person.
That is a first.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah,
I like
I
it. You
agree.
should talk after whoever.
They were
asked that
thinking,
question.
so.
I don't think we'll be renting out rooms.
There aren't many hotel beds in this city, so there you go.
It'd be like a niche market, people
Yeah.
want to sleep in a jail cell.
Maybe Airbnb.
So I want to talk a little bit, because I have a few questions here related to the individuals that are incarcerated in the jail. First and foremost, so how many inmates, county inmates versus state inmates, are housed in the jail any given day?
So today we have about 72 inmates in there. This morning we started with 74. We ended up releasing a couple throughout the day. We probably brought more in and released more, but we started at 74, ended at 72. We run up to about 80 inmates in the jail facility, depending on the time of the year. And about 20% overall of those are state inmates. And the state of Idaho has the same kind of issue that we're having, where they have too many inmates and not enough facility to put them in. And so really when you talk about a state inmate, just so that we all understand the difference between a county inmate and a state inmate, they're a county inmate up until the day they're sentenced on a felony charge. And once they're sentenced, that day they're a state inmate. And then the state starts to pay us to house their inmate. And so we get $55 for the first 7 days and $75 for every day after that to house our inmates. Some jails in Idaho have room and want to rent out beds, and they want to bring that in as a revenue source to help offset facility costs and operational costs. For us, we don't have room, and if the state could and would, I'd be great if they just showed up and picked all their inmates up and removed them. Even if they removed them all, there's kind of a magic number that if we're within about 80% of our total capacity, we're still gonna be over capacity, because what the state looks at for our standards is a per cell amount, not an overall amount. And so we really struggle with housing female inmates, housing protective custody, maximum security inmates, segregation, people with medical concerns. Our jail facility is just not built to handle these types of inmates. And so even if we removed all the state inmates, we would still likely be overpopulated in these specific cells, that we just don't have the ability to house enough of these people.
Kind of a question along these lines. It's related to those with mental illness, and by that you might even talk about other medical conditions. So how will this, a new jail, how would that accommodate those with mental illness? Are there alternatives to incarcerating those with mental illness? What do you do with inmates that have medical issues? Looking at this facility versus the new facility, can you address some of those issues?
Yeah, I think that's a good comment, good question that really didn't come up in the last town hall. But when we talk about inmates with mental health issues, if you look around the state of Idaho, there's not enough mental health beds available in hospitals for people that are suffering from mental illness. And there's oftentimes that these people end up in our facility where they have violated the law and they have charges. And when they come in our facility, it takes a period of time for the court process to designate them as somebody who needs to go to a mental hospital. And after they've been designated, we continue to hold them for a period of time until they go. And often these people, when they're in our facility, they have been off of their medications, and they're really hard to control and to keep safe. And not only to keep them safe, but to keep our staff safe as we're interacting with them. In a new facility, they have padded cells that you can put them in. And so one of the things that we'll do with somebody that's really a danger to themselves is that we'll end up having to restrain them, but we can only restrain them for a short period of time, and we have to unrestrain them. Every time we restrain somebody or unrestrain somebody, that's when one of my deputies is most likely to be injured. And if I can put them in a padded cell, I can leave them in there for a longer period of time, unrestrained, without having to go in and go hands-on with them. That helps keep them safe, and it helps keep my people safe as well. And so they also have cells that are built to help with these people with these illnesses so that we can house them better. The reality is that we will always house a certain number of people with mental illness while we're waiting for a bed to become available to take them to a hospital. And there's that period of time where we need to do that. The other thing we see in medical, inmates with medical, is that we're housing people who are like on CPAPs, and we don't have the cells where we can have CPAPs. And what we end up doing is running extension cords into a general housing unit to plug in a CPAP. That extension cord ends up becoming a risk for them to use to injure themselves. It's also a point where they can arc off of to light things on fire. And it's just really not the safe place to do it. But they actually design cells now where you can put the CPAP in the plumbing chase and only run the cannula into the cell where they can have the cannula for their CPAP. And so there's safer ways for us to house people. And in a new facility, I'd like to be able to include some of these cells that will help keep our inmates and our staff safer as we're housing them.
Just another comment though, you also would have more space to do, bring people in for like a treatment type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we've, over the years, we've had different groups of people who have approached us and wanting to come offer services to inmates. So we do bring in like NA and AA and then church, but those people have to come in the evenings or weekends. The only place we have available really to meet with people is in our cafeteria area. And during a weekday, during the daytime, there are people in and out as we're transferring them to court. There's meals, rec time, there's all these things where all these different inmates are transferring through that area. And these people work during the daytime, and they are willing and want to come in and provide services to the inmates, but they want to do that on a Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 day period, and there's no place for them to come do that. In a new facility, they actually build large rooms, classrooms, or larger rooms where you can take and bring inmates into that secured area, and they can work with somebody that can help them with some of these issues. And really, when you look at the length of time that we hold some inmates, there's opportunities that I believe we're missing out on to kind of change the inmates and their likelihood to be reoffended and coming back into our facility.
Will there be opportunities with an expanded jail, more space to raise potentially revenue from other counties, other jurisdictions, the state of Idaho sending their inmates to the expanded space? Yeah,
there would be lots of opportunities. The federal government, through the marshals, they pay counties over $100 a day to house inmates. It costs us about $80 a day to house an inmate. The state of Idaho doesn't have room. They're willing to pay the $75 a day to house inmates here. And there's other counties. I mean, when you look at Ada County and Canyon County, they're both overpopulated and don't have space, and they rent beds from other county facilities. And so there's other counties in Idaho that are in the same place that we're in, where they don't have enough room for the inmates they need to house, and they'd be willing to pay to have inmates housed. And so whether you look at through the marshals, even ICE is trying to find facilities that can hold inmates for them. When you look at the state of Idaho and state inmates, and then you look at other counties, there's plenty of other opportunities where in the meantime, when you first build the jail, is really intended that you don't fill it until the end of its life cycle, and there'll be empty beds in that time frame, and those empty beds can be revenue that can help either offset the operational cost or pay the bond down early, or do both. And really that just rests on our commissioners as they evaluate the revenue and the expenses to allocate that funds. And so it can be allocated to both operational costs and to paying the bond.
So I've got another question here related to state inmates. And it is, the point is that in state facilities, there are certain programs for rehabilitation, there are classes, and other programs that the inmates receive that help to rehabilitate. Is there that option within the county jail? If not, can you talk about some of those differences, and if that's the case, is there a benefit to having state inmates in county jails if they're not getting those other treatments that they benefit from in the state system?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've been in several different meetings with the governor and the director of prisons, Bree Derrick, from July to now. Matter of fact, I met with her just last week and her staff, and she's interested in entering into contracts with counties that have the ability to offer not only space but programming. And when you look at the prison facility, they often put that programming in near the end of their sentence. When you're looking at a term inmate, they often take and have them serve the first part of their service or their sentence, then whether that's in Idaho, whether that's in out of state, or wherever they're going to have them serve that at. But as they near the time when they'll start applying for parole, they want to bring them back to a state facility where they can get those programs and can try to help with the recidivism. But she is interested in counties that have the space, that have a room available and the ability to provide that programming, and willing to help offset costs for doing so. And so when you look at some of the state inmates that we've housed, although I think it's seldom done, it's not the norm, but we've had people here for over a year waiting for the state to transport them out. And those inmates in that year really receive nothing that they might have received in a prison system. And with a better designed facility that is designed to have these opportunities available, I think there's options that we could do that and help replace some of the stuff they would get in a prison system.
There's also a question here about women's services within the jail. So with the new proposed jail, will you have the opportunity to provide, I can't fully read, I apologize, the writing, but what treatment opportunities and rights will women have as a new inmate compared to the treatment and rights that male inmates have?
So one of the things that comes up in our facility is right now we have male inmates that are inmate workers, and the inmate workers do things like help prepare the meals. We have a summit that oversees and plans all the meals, but the inmate workers are helping with preparing and delivering that food to inmates. And then they're also do the laundry services, so we collect all of the clothing that inmates wear, and then they wash and dry and fold and put away, and then redistribute out the clothes that the inmates are wearing. And they also do all the cleaning, so any of the mopping, waxing on the floors, anything like that, they do all of that work as well. And so the hard part in our facility right now is that we don't have a location to house male inmate workers and female inmate workers. So we can have male inmate workers or female inmate workers. And then we don't have the staff to monitor them if we have both males and females out at the same time. In a new facility, it's certainly something that we could look at where it could be designed in a way to where we have separate housing available so we can keep males and females separate, and where we could possibly keep them in separate areas of the jail facility so that we could have some workers doing one job while others are doing the others. But it really just comes down to keeping those males and females separated within the facility.
I've got a question here related to and I don't know what the cost is, but the question is, where did the $40 million come from in determining the cost of the jail? And how did you arrive at that if the cost of acquiring land hasn't been taken into consideration yet?
That's a good question. So when we looked at initially the estimate from the initial architect that we used, estimated it to be about $54 to $76 million. I was at a conference early this spring and talked with Canyon County, and you might have seen some news on a facility they're planning to build. And they connected me with a vendor that was there that has steel cells. And I met with that vendor there and talked about their steel cells. And then I went back to their facility in Georgia, toured their facility, and talked with them about those particular types of cells and why those would help reduce our cost. And then I stopped in Indiana and went through a facility to actually see them in use. And so in reducing that cost that was estimated and also increasing it, because the 54 to 76 million was for a 125 bed jail that had a partial sheriff's office. And what we're estimating for 40 million is a 230 bed jail with a full sheriff's office. And so we got that estimate from having some different general contractors and architects look at some plans of a jail facility in Indiana. And they looked at those plans and said, in today's market, we think it would cost this amount. And so it's an estimated amount. We anticipate that in building the facility, we'll be able to use some county resources that we already have. When you look at our road and bridge department, they already have the ability to do some site work of leveling land, preparing roads, and things like that. And so we're anticipating in a new facility that we have some resources that the county already owns, and we have staff that already has knowledge and ability, and we want to use those as much as possible to help with reducing that cost. But really, that $40 million is it's just an estimate. And when it comes down to it, the jail facility is what my priority is. And as we go to start building this out, that if there's cuts that need to be made, it's gonna likely be on our sheriff's office side. We'll likely keep that jail facility intact because that's really the long-term piece that we really need to plan for. And it's my priority of where I think we need to be investing at. So that is true.
Kind of a follow-up question to this. You mentioned, this is going back to the beginning of our session today, you talked about the jail being designed in a way that would allow for more inmates and potentially fewer staff. Can you talk a little bit about the logistics of that, how you would manage more inmates with fewer staff?
Sure, I'll be able to manage it with the addition of a smaller amount. When you look at our 69 bed jail, I have 20 staff positions in the jail budget, and they're running it in Indiana for 220 beds with 25. And so it'll be a few more staff than we have now, but it's not gonna be double or triple our current staff. And really, the way that I look at the facility is that not only do we need to build a facility that'll last for the next 20 years, but we need to build it with the addition in mind for this thing to be expanded and doubled in size. And so really, when we're talking about a 20 to 30 year facility for this jail, I'm talking a 40 to 60 year facility that we're gonna have. It makes no sense for us to build a jail for the jail that we need in the next 20 to 30 years without thinking about what happens after that. And so the way that it's designed is that you have your intake area, your sally port where inmates come in, and there's the booking area. And in that area, that's also where they have the medical area, the medical cells, it has holding cells. It's where all of the laundry services and the kitchen and the inmate workers at, all of the classroom area, any of the video court stuff is all in kind of that main area of the jail. And really you design that to be for the entire facility when you add the expansion on. And there's a corridor that goes off of that goes down to where the actual general population will be. And that's built in like a circle or like a pie-shaped area where they are pie-shaped wedges that are the individual cells. And you build those out all together in that one area. And the steel cells are not the brick and mortar corridors, but it's the cells at the back. And then directly across from that corridor, there's a corridor that goes out the other side. And what they did at that Indiana facility was that they put out, on that other corridor, there's a door that ends, it's an outside door. And beneath that door is all of the water and sewer and conduit so that they can add on to that facility. So when they go back, they don't have to tear up any of the existing jail facility to get connected into water, sewer, power. It's all planned out right there so that they can just connect on and go. And that helps save some of that cost in the future. The other piece too is when we go and do that round where we check on all inmates, they have to walk through all of the old 1972 jail up into the newer 1999 jail, and they have to walk all the way around. In this new jail, all those doors are side by side together right there in that pie-shaped area. And so when they go to a round, they're just walking from one pod and out and into the next one and out, into the next one and out. And so those are all side by side. They're all right there grouped together. And so you won't be walking throughout a large facility. Our deputies put on miles every day just walking throughout the facility. This won't have that same impact because they're all congregated together.
I've got a few related questions for the commissioners. This is related to, I guess I'll split it into two different questions. What safeguards are in place if the bids that come in or interest rates exceed what has been anticipated? And I guess a second follow-up question from that is, after construction has started, what protections does the county have against cost overrides and things of that nature that sometimes happen when you're building facilities?
So I'll take the first part. So I would say that those things do happen. Sometimes things just end up costing more than you expect. So if that were to be the case, we would scale down the completed project. We would probably maintain the shell. The system that Andy's talking about is somewhat modular with these steel cells. So I would imagine that we would put in the number of cells that we need plus some, and maybe not build out, not finish all of the cells until later when we've had the money. The other thing I want to mention about this construction, Andy's been working with architects that do nothing but build jails. So they really understand how jails work and the most efficient design to accommodate the needs of a jail. So that I think is really good, and they have a lot of experience with jails, and that's why we've been able to trim down that total bond cost. And I want to mention one more thing, is that the way these jails are designed, the cells have a chase or a kind of a walkway behind them, so that if they need to do any maintenance on the electrical or the plumbing, it can all be done from behind the cells rather than having to empty out the cells, which is what we have to do now, and move those inmates to another place. So, if you have anything to add to that?
With regard to the bond and the interest rate, it's very much like a mortgage. When you sign the papers, it fixes that interest rate. So that's not gonna be a floating number. It'll fix it for the life of the bond. Once we get the blessing of the citizens, we would go to a financial institution and basically get that loan and fix that interest rate. So then that's the way it will be until it's either paid off or whatever, until that bond is completed. And that fixes how much funds we get, and that's where, if they're in the development of from the architect and from the construction plans, if there's a projection for something that would exceed that, we will have to trim it back, because we won't get any other money.
I was just gonna add to that real quick. The bond amount is fixed, so there isn't the opportunity to increase it, so you wouldn't see a higher amount. The county would have to either trim the project or find other funds to go above that, the tax limit.
Just to add Jennifer was talking about, because those cells are modular, and really some of that cost savings is because when they're building the cell, they're pre-installing all of the electrical and plumbing and networking that goes into a cell. They're pre-installing that as they're building it in a plant. And out here at the facility, we're talking about a steel-sided building where they're running all of the plumbing and water up under a slab and back into that plumbing chase area. And when they bring the cells in, you set them in place and weld them in place and connect them to the services that are there. And so one way that it could be trimmed is we could build out the brick and mortar walls and add in the plumbing and sewer, all of that in the back, and then just not put cells in. So we could put in enough cells to operate. We could leave some of those pods empty, and then in the future, we could just purchase another set of cells, finish another pod, and open that up. And so we could do, if we needed 5 pods, we could open up 5 pods, and then we could open up another additional pod down the road as the county saved money, found other revenue sources, use the money that we make from renting out beds. We could look for different type of revenue sources to finish that off. And so I think there's some different ways that we could look at trimming the project and still really completing the project so that we're giving the service that we're trying to give.
Okay, thanks. Now we're starting to wind down now. I don't see other questions coming in. So I do want to give the Citizens Committee members an opportunity to kind of share any other thoughts that you've thought of and we haven't covered at this point, things that you guys looked at that would be important for the public to know, as we wrap up.
Yeah, so I actually was pretty impressed with the process, the length of the process. It was about 6 months. It was 5-hour-long meetings. It was a tour of not only the jail, but all of the facility. I felt like they listened to our concerns. We had major concerns. The maintenance was a huge one for us. We didn't want to recommend a project that we weren't confident could be taken care of well, because we felt that some of the problems that exist now are due to lack of having that maintenance. They heard us and answered by hiring a facilities manager ahead of time. So they now have a facilities manager that takes care of everything. One of our other concerns was EMS facilities. We think that also needs to be a high priority. They listened. They reassured us that there are other funds that are starting to take care of those facilities in other ways, that will be addressed. So I think it was overall a good process and one that I enjoyed being a part of.
I did too. Sheriff mentioned a phased approach to building this jail, and our recommendation to the county was to take a phased approach. So those of us who are living in Payette County now pay for the needs of Payette County now, and the future expansion is paid for by future Payette County residents. But it's just really important that we get the first phase right, so we plan for the future, for the next however many years, so it can be expanded on for Payette County's growth, but not actually come out of your pockets. So that was an important process, and we asked a lot of critical questions, all coming down to what's this going to cost? What's this going to cost each one of you? And that's when we got all that information, we decided to recommend a new facility.
Commissioners, any final comments you want to share before we wrap up?
Anything off the top of my head?
Just know that we really looked into this process and looked at all different opportunities and, trying to figure out what was best for the county, and that's why we decided to go ahead with the general obligation bond. We really feel this is best for the county.
We started this process a little more than 2 years ago, looking at the county-wide functions and where we're at. And much like a comprehensive plan, we looked at where growth might take us and where we'll have to expand the county's operations to keep up with that. And, the Citizens Committee was invaluable in kind of analyzing all that kind of stuff and digesting it from our local perspective. And so coming to this point, it's something that we spent a lot of time on, considering, you know, what's the best options for the county, and this is what we thought would be the best answer to the challenges we're facing. So we've invested a lot. I hope people understand that this wasn't a light decision. It wasn't a quick decision. It was something we built up to over quite some time.
I do want one more comment. When we were trying to figure out how to pay for this too, something Adam said is that this responsibility for this really falls on the current residents, even though the need for the jail is because of the growth we've experienced and what we're anticipating the growth will be in the future. So one of the other funding mechanisms that we explored is impact fees, which charges a fee to new development in order to pay for the needed infrastructure. And that was something we really worked hard on, did all the studies, and we could not get buy-in from the cities in order to implement that. So even if we had that, it would not have created enough revenue to build the jail. But that sort of approach, it's a different way to fund needed infrastructure. So that is something we'd still like to work toward in the future, but currently we don't have that. So having a bond is the only way we can come up with the needed money to do this. So.
Before we wrap up, this gentleman has one question, and we'll wrap up from there.
I've already been through this.
Okay.
But one thing that I need to ask, I received this Saturday in the mail. And there's two items on there that I'm gonna address. One, City of New Plymouth was not notified through this packet. Payette approved it, but City of New Plymouth was left out. And the second item, the jail is not 50 years old. I'm well aware of how old that jail is. We were in the roofing business, so when the county done the remodel, and I cannot tell you right now exactly the date, but it is over 2,000 years. I'm gonna say it was around 2001, 2003. New jail.
The original jail was from the
Right.
70s.
The original-
It
the original
wasn't
jail.
complete, yeah, it wasn't completely remodeled. There was some remodel, but there was still an old piece of that jail, about half of it, from the 70s.
70s.
Yeah, when the courthouse was built, the original
76?
jail was built, as part of that. And then in '99, a bond was passed that expanded the jail, and just about doubled its size and capacity. But that was the last expansion that was done. And that bond was actually paid off early, a couple of years early.
Yeah, and I would just add too that,
I've
New
already been
Plymouth
through
has.
this. Excuse me, I've already been through this with Andy. And I'm totally against that site out there, you know. I learned a lot of stuff tonight, really do, and I appreciate you people taking the time to serve. But the fact is, as a taxpayer, my taxes raised at 41% overall last year. So it is a concern. I'm 85 years old. I don't wanna be taxed out of my property.
Yeah, what was your first thing you said about New Plymouth?
What?
What was the first thing you said about New Plymouth?
New Plymouth was not included in this little brochure.
So the reason why was that New Plymouth has already had its meeting. So we didn't include it in here because Andy has already been to the city
That's
of
what
New
I'm
Plymouth.
saying, but New Plymouth was left out of that brochure.
They are left out because they'd already, the date where
Hey,
they
I
had
attended
already
that
gone.
meeting.
So
I
it
attended
didn't
that
make
meeting.
sense to include.
I walked
there.
out of that goddamn meeting. Excuse me.
Okay.
If you know, I wasn't born yesterday. I've lived in Payette County since 1948.
Seth, just a
Yeah.
couple other things. I think it's important for everybody to know
I'm
that
not gonna take it,
the,
sir. I've already been there.
I think it's important for the county, for everyone to know that the county is, has, no debt.
That's
So
good.
it's debt-free, and it paid off its bond early. So the reality is it's a financial house is in good order. That way.
As we wrap up, Sheriff Creech, are there any final comments or?
I just wanna say thanks for coming tonight. We had maybe 30-ish people here at the first town hall. I'm glad to see all of you here tonight. And, this has been really important. I've been trying to get to as many different places as I can to talk to citizens. We've tried to be as engaging as we can with the surveys and, through our social media posts and with the message was put out on Code Red. And I just really appreciate everybody's interest and involvement. It matters to us. The things that you've sent to us in any format it's been sent to us has been helpful to us, and that we're considering those things, and that we're looking at just making sure that that we're doing the things that the citizens believe we should be doing. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you guys for attending.